Fun, guys. Thank you.
All right.
There we go. Well, hello, everyone. Hi again. Welcome to Creating Pathways, Women in Spirits. My goodness. Thank you all so much for being here today. My name is Nicola Riske, and I am the Brand Education Manager for Southern Europe for the Macallan Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. And I'm also a proud member of the Education Committee for the Tales of the Cocktail Foundation. I'm also your co-moderator for today's session, and I'm just thrilled to see all of these wonderful faces on this screen. My fellow moderator is an absolute rock star. So please speak up. Go. Take it away, Jordan.
Hi, everybody. You might have seen my face a few times this week during Tales. My name is Jordan Zimmerman. I am the Advocacy and Whiskey Education Lead at Brown-Forman. And today's session, again, is about creating pathways. So we have a very globally esteemed panel of women with us today who've made enormous strides in the spirits industry, be it creating their own pathways, new spirit innovations, creating their own brands. We have a few of those, and each one of them has their own story. I believe that we can all learn a lot from sharing these stories and draw inspiration from them, which hopefully can help others be bold and be brave and to find their own pathways as well. Nicola and I know each other from her being the push for me into the industry that I now love and cherish and hopefully never leave. So I truly believe in female mentorship and support. So the theme of Tales this year, if you didn't know, Tales always has a theme. I always thought the theme was all roads lead to Erin Rose, but apparently there are other themes. The theme this year at Tales is catalyst. I love that word. A catalyst, if you're looking up the official definition, is a person or thing that precipitates an event or change. What I love about this word is I think we're at a moment in our world, in our society, whereby we get to redefine and rebuild that catalyst that we can grow from. When I think about growth, I think about motivation. So today, we want to know from all you ladies, what motivates you, what inspires you, what gives you that spark, and what gives you that drive. With that in mind, we have a few questions to run through today, but I think first we probably want to just have a quick introduction to all of our panelists, just in case anyone doesn't have the full quilt here. So just, name your title, what you do, and perhaps what company you work for, if that's applicable to you. So, Allison?
Great. Yeah, I'm Allison Parc. I'm the founder of Bren French Single Malt Whiskey, and very excited to be on here today.
All right. Talita.
Say Talisa or Lisa.
Hi, I'm Talita Simões. Thanks for having me here. I'm brand ambassador for Diageo in Brazil.
Natasha.
Hi, I'm Natasha Sofia. I'm based out of Chicago, originally from Puerto Rico, and I'm the National Director for Education and Advocacy for Davos Brands.
Amazing. Lynn.
I am Lynn House. I am the National Spirit Specialist and Portfolio Mixologist for Heaven Hill Brands. I was also the co-chair for the Beyond the Bar track for this year's Tales of the Cocktail Education Committee.
Awesome. Lisa.
Hi, I'm Lisa Wicker. I am a head distiller, head blender, and president of Widow Jane Distillery. My primary residence is still Main Street, Bardstown, Kentucky, and I live in Brooklyn, New York, 90% of the time these days. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Effie.
Effie Panagopoulos. I'm the founder of Kleos Mastika Spirit, first Greek woman in history to start a liquor brand, and currently based in New York.
Awesome. Robin.
Hi, Robin Nance, National Portfolio Ambassador for Beam Suntory, based in Chicago, and I also have the honor of working with Lynn on the Beyond the Bar Committee for the Education Committee of Tales of the Cocktail.
Anne.
Hi, I'm Anne Brock. I'm the Master Distiller at Bombay Sapphire, and I'm also the Grand Rectifier of the Gin Guild in the UK.
Awesome. Georgie.
Hi, I'm Georgie Bell. I'm the head of advocacy for our incubation brands at Bacardi.
And Tracie.
Hi, I am the head distiller apprentice for the Nearest and Jack Advancement Initiative. New title, new name, all exciting. We'll talk about that later.
Jenna.
Hi, I'm Jenna Baum. I'm Global Brand Ambassador for New to World Brands for Diageo, and super excited to see you all.
Wonderful. And Jackie.
Hi, I'm Jackie Zykan. I am the Master Taster for Old Forester.
Awesome.
Great. With that, let's dive in now that we've done introductions for everyone. So first question for the panel today is just, we all know that career paths in spirits are really not always a straight line. Many, in fact, actually, I would just say all of you, everyone on this panel has had a very interesting career pathway. So asking a few of you, tell us a little bit about how you came into your current role. What was that pathway like? I'm going to start with Tracie here because I know that our time is limited with you today, and you can tell us a little bit more about that and why. So,
absolutely. So my path, as you know, as many of you know, actually on this call know who are part of my journey, that this was not where I was meant to end up. I should be on the Great White Way and Broadway, which is shut down. So maybe this is a better option. Anyways, I was a performer. I toured nationally, internationally, singing and dancing with different Broadway style shows, and it was amazing, wonderful, and I had access to a lot of beautiful cuisines and cultures, and that really became the focus of my life, was seeking out opportunities to link flavors with experiences. So when I was in Canada and somebody opened a bottle of you know, dead animals and Band-Aids and tires across the bar, that was a moment that I decided I was going to hop in and figure out how that linked and how that could become a part of my life. And I fell in headfirst into single malt scotch, and then realized, oh wait, anything that doesn't taste like this peaty Band-Aid, I'm having difficulty actually discerning. So then I laid off the peated whiskeys for a while, and that's how I really came into the rest of the category and really dove into all of the flavors that the whiskey category itself really is. I was moved to New York, where I was auditioning off and on, and met so many amazing, incredible women and men in the industry who gave me the step up, who inspired me. And Nicola, you know that you are definitely one of those women, as is Allison, Parc, Robin, Lynn. Like, it's an incredible community that supported me and gave me access to education, to opportunity, to growth in a way that I mean, I was hungry. So I was going to take any scrap you could give me, first of all. But also they were generous with their knowledge, with their opportunities, and were willing to help me get beyond where I ever expected to go. So now so I worked my way up, brand ambassador, national brand ambassador for Glenfiddich Single Malt Scotch, which is a really incredible job that I would not have left had it not been to pursue my actual dream of heading to the process side of learning to distill. So Nearest and Jack, Uncle Nearest, Jack Daniels, they have a history. If you don't know it, look it up. Uncle Nearest was an enslaved man who taught Jack Daniels how to distill. Jack Daniels took that knowledge, that talent, and opened his own distillery. And his first person he hired was Uncle Nearest, at full wage, full respect, full honor in this relationship between them. And I am basically what that legacy is creating. They have now created a foundation that it focuses on small businesses, leadership acceleration, and education. They're actually creating a school of distillation. I am in the leadership acceleration and in the track to become a head distiller, which is basically just providing me the education, the hands-on experience to be able to step into a distillery and be beneficial. I am not expecting to necessarily step in and run things from the get-go. That's ridiculous. But I will be gosh darn close. I'm studying my butt off, every certification I can get. I mean, I'm teaching myself organic chemistry again. Like, this is gonna happen, you guys. So it's really about the fact that I am one stone in this road towards creating diversity within the entire whiskey industry, with a focus currently on American whiskey. And I am incredibly thankful for Uncle Nearest and Jack Daniels for stepping forward, seeing there was a problem and creating a path that can actually solve and correct. Because not only are they just providing this education, they're providing me with mentors, They're providing me with a community that will support me when I get in these roles. And that is what's important. It's thinking about the full 360 of what it is to be a woman of color, a woman, period, in these roles where we are often surrounded by people who don't understand the culture, who that culture hasn't really relegated us into these positions. And we can't always be fighting to fit in. We have to, the culture has to shift to just be inclusive of us. We belong there. So, yeah.
Just to start off, I think Tracie, all of us on the panel, you see, we are so
you belong here, guys. We
excited.
We are the whiskey industry, and I am so excited to see all of these faces because we are the industry. We are that change. Like,
so excited, so excited. With that, I know if Tracie disappears, it's because she's on her way to class.
Exactly. So I'm actually currently on a 6-day distillation course. And what's funny is I am totally that horrible student that's like know-it-all, asking the questions that's like so beyond what we're talking about right now. But like, this is my chance to pick in people's brains who've been doing this for 40 years. And like, they have to tell me because I paid them. So, so I literally like every day they're like, okay, Tracie again. What do you want now, Tracie? But I'm also gaining so much incredible knowledge and experience from this opportunity. So I will have to jump off before the end of the call, but guys, know that I love every single one of you and support anything you're doing. And anybody out there that is looking for a way in, we are here. We are generous with our opportunities.
I love that. I love that. With what Tracie has just started us off on here, when we're talking about distillation studies as well, and speaking of career pathways, I'd like to take this question over now to Georgie Bell and talk a little bit about her pathway as well, which I think is a very unique pathway. So Georgie, tell us a little bit about your studies and how you grew into the role that you've just moved into at Bacardi.
Of course. And I mean, how can I follow that? I mean, Jesus. But no, I'm really,
I love you, Georgie. You're my inspiration.
I think your journey has been incredible, Tracie, and I'm so enjoying following what you're doing online. I think it's amazing. And I can remember last year where we were sitting at the Carousel bar and you were like, let's just drink some champagne while we're planning this, shall we? And I just wish we were there. Anyway, so I started like a lot of other people probably here as a bartender while I was at university in Edinburgh. And I fell in love with the whiskey part of my back bar. I didn't like it at first. I thought it was awful. You know, it was a drink that my dad drank, and then got to learn to appreciate it, and then really fell head over heels for it, and the culture and the people and the spectrum of flavors, and from a bartender's perspective, what you could do with it. So it's, you know, versatility. And when I graduated, I realized that I wanted to get a job in the whiskey industry. But back in 2010, I mean, the whiskey industry, every spirit industry has changed a lot in the last 10 years. The whiskey industry has come a long way. I don't want to single it out being just by itself. But it was very different. So I was applying for jobs. They were like, you're not experienced enough, blah, blah, blah. So I ended up getting a second degree in distilling, which was essentially biochemistry and chemical engineering through the Institute of Brewing and Distilling. And like Tracie, I worked my ass off, and I ended up getting the highest mark in the world when I graduated, and I got a scholarship to the Worshipful Company of Distillers, through which I'm now a livery member of, which was a huge accolade for me. So I kind of came down this in an education route. And I'd really highly recommend that to people that are looking to get into one spirit category, is just learn as much as you can. There's so many amazing courses out there. Like WSCT have totally upped their game with their spirits courses recently. I've just done their level 3 and it's hard and it's great. And the IBD courses as well, phenomenal. So I honestly, if anyone wants to know anything about them, please let me know. Happy to answer questions. I started off with the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, which was a brilliant place for me to work from, and they took a chance on me. I was behind the bar there while I was doing my diploma, and they were like, well, we're growing internationally and we need someone to look after that. And so at the age of 24, it's quite young actually, I became their global brand ambassador and hybrid international marketing manager. And then for the last 4 years, I've been the global single malts ambassador at Bacardi. 8 years being global, traveling around the world for 6 to 9 months of the year is a really long time. And I realized through all of that, actually, what I love most is that the things that I love about Scotch, I actually love about in all other spirit categories. And I love the stories and the education side around them and how they're made. Production on whiskey is just as exciting as production on everything else, you know. So Bacardi have been amazing, and recently I moved into a head of advocacy role across our incubation brands, so including our 5 single malts, but also Teeling in North America, looking after a bit on Angel's Envy, Noilly Pratt, Oxygen. It's really exciting. And I think, you know, there is never a carved career path, Nicola. I know you've kind of, you know, said that, and I think we're all here to show testimony within that, and the fact that, you know, it's important that we do whatever we feel passionate about and push ourselves forward in that, and we have to be the change that we want to see. So I think that's why it's always good to hear all of these stories. So yeah, that's where I am today.
Yeah, Georgie, that's amazing. And I want to say also that you were the one who inspired me to go and do my GCD at IBD. That was thanks to you. And then to continue and work on my diploma in distillation and everything. And so again, that inspiration of learning from one another and inspiring each other and sharing stories. I mean, that is what pushed me into my continued learning in distillation and in whiskey, and opened my mind up to the spirits industry in an entirely different way, in the way that I approach spirits as a result of that. And it was just that one thing of having a drink in Edinburgh with Georgie, and she goes, you know what, you should look at taking this course here. And I said, oh, thanks, I'm going to take a look into that. Changed everything. So yeah, it's amazing how those little hints, those little words of advice, how strong and powerful they can be. Thank you.
Good. Oh, I'm glad. Yeah, it's great. Highly recommend. And if anyone wants to know any more information, please, I think a few of us have done it, so let any of us know.
Yes. With that, continuing on with distillation, I'd love to hear from Lisa and a little bit about your story, because you have a very unusual pathway into this business.
Yeah, I need to find some sort of way to like string it together so it's not so freaking boring, right? But yeah, I came at this late in life. I was a commercial winemaker for 10 years. I have 3 grown children and 2 grandsons. And so I'm at this third act, right? I studied journalism in college. I should have studied science. I worked in a tech lab there for 3 years as the technical writer, because I just turned 60 a month ago. So it was pre-PC days that I was doing the right technical writing, and biologists couldn't spell, right? And so here I am in this lab, knowing that's probably where I should have been. I should have probably changed gears at that point in time and pursued biology, and I didn't. Married, 3 kids, live all over the country, tended to always work in the arts, settled back in the Midwest, started a costume company for a professional dance company in an underserved arts area, and ran that costume company for 6 years, and started as a farmhand with a winery, harvesting grapes, and I was costuming a nutcracker at the same time. So it was, yeah, but after raising 3 kids, it's all a piece of cake, right? And anyway, ended up in winemaking from the farmhand thing. 30 days into production in winemaking, I thought this is where I was supposed to be all along. And got fortunate that a woman, Ellie Butz, she was a retired Purdue professor and working for Lala Man Yeast, took me under her wing. I was trained by a really intelligent man and gave me the best advice of my entire career. Don't just drink your own juice, you're gonna start to like it. And but also pushed me. And he's the one that really introduced me to the wide world of whiskey, because we'd make wine all day, drink whiskey in the evenings, and compare notes the next morning before we got started again. And he's the one that really got me interested in distillation. So when my youngest graduated from high school 10 years ago, I packed up, moved to Kentucky, and because I had an offer to build a winery there, and met Steve Beam at the time, and that's where everything started falling into place. I thought I was going to have it still at the winery and distill brandy, and you just keep I have a tendency to say yes and then figure it all out later, much to the dismay of my family and friends. But yeah, you know, and you take, it's school of hard knocks, you know, 60, 80 hours a week. When I started in distilling, you know, there are days that I'd leave crying and cry all the way home. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. I had to be back on site at 7 the next morning, you know, so yeah, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And my work started to get noticed there. I got fired from there when Lexco purchased them. And anyway, a whole sort of like craziness in between. I had a job offer from a really well-known distillery, which really surprised me. I thought I'd have to go back to winemaking, and then another distillery turned around and countered that offer. And that's right when craft distilling was taking off. There were 250 craft distilleries when I started with Steve Beam, and there's, you know, 2000 now, over 2000. And so I was in the right time at the right place. Sometimes I wish I'd started younger, but the opportunities wouldn't have been there. So, you know, the timing as far as that, and being able to be kind of an accelerated course. And so I distilled in Southern Indiana for Starlight for 1.5 years, thought I'd be there forever. Well-known distiller asked me if I wanted to oversee a project in Bardstown, and I built the first craft distillery in Bardstown, Kentucky, thought I'd stay on as the distiller there. And it was time for me to move on, and I opened my own consulting firm, Saints and Monsters, named after my grandsons, but don't tell my daughter. And my second client were Samson and Surrey, my second large client. Someone well-known in the industry called my former boss and said, "Can I have her phone number?" And, you know, when my former boss called, he's like, "They want to talk to you." I'm like, "You're kidding me. I can't believe this." And then my, you know, current boss called me, and he said, "I need somebody to move to New York." And my consulting business was, you know, I was really enjoying the clients that I had already. And because at that point I'd taken on someone else, and I told him no, which was unlike me. And I walk in, I've told Allison this story, I walk into my living room in Bardstown, and there's a half a bottle of Bren sitting on the front of my whiskey collection. And like, I just blew this, that's an omen. And fortunately for me, he called me back, flew up to Bardstown, and 10 minutes into dinner when he started telling me what the project was going to be. So I agreed to come on as a consultant. I was a consultant for a year, and then he asked, my boss asked if I'd please dismiss my other clients. And painful as it was, I did, and came on full-time with Samson and Surrey. I was director of distilling for all the brands for a minute, and then they moved me into the president and head distiller, head blender position 2 years ago, November 1st. It's been a wild ride, yeah. I'm the consulting distiller at George Washington's distillery at Mount Vernon. I work with Steve Bayshore there, and that was part of how I got discovered for this project, because I've been there for 4.5 years now. Yeah, crazy wild ride. You just say yes, figure it out, yeah.
All of us, I think I'm speechless.
Oh yeah, you know, and you go back and people are like, you know, and you know, you have to live your own lessons, right? So raise my kids, you can't have the dark without the light, you can't have the yin without the yang. And you know, you look back, sometimes you're like, I can't believe, you know, the day you find out that the men working for you making more money than you are, and the day, you know, there's these things that happen. It's like, how did I keep going? And it's because I have the support of my family and my friends, and they're like, you love this too much for that to get in your way. You just got to keep going, right? And, you know, and so it's interesting because, you know, here, with all of you here, I can't imagine how many stories we all have. I can't even, it's got to be infinite, right?
It's amazing.
Yeah, what we've all been through to get here. Yeah, and we're still going forward. That, you know, it's like, you know, the road's going to be great ahead, but it's not going to be without a, you know, a bump or two. Yeah.
Wow. When you say follow your passion, I love it when your passions, we can have more than one passion also, and that can evolve and that can change. And your career pathway and the way that you've grown and evolved and continue, I mean, I just think that that's phenomenal, because we have to follow our heart, we have to follow our interests, we have to follow our passions. And it sounds to me like you've done that in so many incredible ways. That's
And also 60, yes, passion is the best moisturizer, because that, yes, just saying.
100%. From there, I'd like to take this question over to Natasha Sofia to tell us a little bit about her career pathway as well. Natasha, tell us about Davos and how that came all about.
So to get to Davos, there's a little bit of a, a fun pathway. I left my house at 15. I thought I knew it all. If I could go back right now and throw a chancla at that girl, I would. I really thought that I knew so much, and I didn't. And then that's how I fell into the hospitality industry, because I started serving tables at Johnny Rockets. And then at the age of 16, drinking age in Puerto Rico is 18, and I lied and I said I was 18. Since I lived alone, nobody questioned it. And I started bartending at nightclubs, and I'm thinking, think about it like, rum and cokes followed with shooters of B-52. And I was doing this while I was still going to school, and then I was going to college at 17, holding 2 to 3 bar jobs. I was working as a Geek Squad agent for Best Buy. I was the first woman to be a Geek Squad agent in the Caribbean under the age of 30. And then I was also being a promoter for events, and I was still getting really, really, really good grades in college, and I was paying for my college. I was trying to pave my own way. I don't think I slept at all any of this time, but I was still bartending, but it was a different type of bartending back then. And this was in Puerto Rico. So like, we didn't have brand ambassador roles. We didn't have any of this. And as time started moving forward, I started head bartending at like the Pina Colada Club, or at the Hilton, where the Pina Colada was invented. And then I moved into the opening team of La Factoria in Puerto Rico. And I got graced with the opportunity to come to Tales 7 years ago as a cocktail apprentice. And coming from Puerto Rico, where like we didn't have access to a lot of tools, we didn't get bitters, we didn't get rye whiskeys, we didn't get mezcal, we didn't get chartreuse, like all of these spirits that we didn't get. And I was so curious, and I went to Tales, and I came back, and I just like sat down, and I looked at my team and Leslie and Robert, who are my mentors, and I was like, I'm mind blown. I need to grow and learn so much. So I challenged myself, and I sold everything I had, and I went to New York. And when I went to New York, thank you, Chaim, for giving me a first opportunity, because I got off the plane and I was like, what did I just do? Like, why am I here? I don't have a job. I don't have money. What am I going to do now? But as I was sitting at that bar, Lindsay Geiger came in, and she was interviewing somebody for the part-time brand ambassador role for Bowls. And she finished that interview, and that person left. And I was kind of like, as the bartender, you don't comment, you don't interject. I was listening, and that person hadn't come prepared for their interview. And she was asking them about the spirit. She was asking about stuff. And like, they were like, what's Geneva? And they were like, oh, it's kind of like really cool gin. And I was like, I've been bootlegging this stuff to Puerto Rico so we can taste and nerd out. And like, I'm so passionate about the history about this. Like, come on, bro, there's an answer to this. And, he left, and I like sat down with her, and we talked for hours, and I was like telling her about all the history on her spirits without knowing what she was, because these roles didn't exist to me. I just felt that I found somebody who was a spirits nerd as well, and I could communicate with them. So I talked to her, and then like, she just looked at me, she's like, you want to be a brand ambassador? And I was like, what's that? And she explained it to me, and I was like, so I get to learn more about spirits. I get to share knowledge. I get to grow passion with a lot of people that are like me and need somebody to, educate them, because if not, we're going to have situations like what you just had. And if there's more people educating, then we're going to like narrow that group of people that don't know, and we're expanding knowledge. And that's what's more important to me, expanding knowledge. So she hired me, and that's when I realized that my career path wasn't just doing that. I wanted to grow in that. So 6 months in, I got promoted from part-time to full-time. And then I was like, I want to travel and do this. I want to teach more people. And they gave me more markets. And I remember meeting, like Robin Nance as I started growing into this role, and seeing her, and seeing other women, and seeing other men, and seeing a lot of other people in this community that were just incredibly helpful and so generous with their knowledge. And then the program got cut. So I went back to bartending, and I thought I was done. I was like, okay, that's it. But then I started working with Cocktail Guru, who gave me opportunities to work with like the Chilean Pisco Association out of Chile. And then, you know, from giving classes in the UN on spirits to Travis Tober coming up to me and saying, hey, you want to work for Davos Brands? And I said yes. And then from there, I've been with Davos Brands around 4 years, and at the end of this year. And it was also something the similar way, where I started as a part-time ambassador and I went, you know, full-time, a few markets, half the nation. And now then I went national. And when I went national, I was like, okay, I think I've gathered tools enough to try to teach other people how to do this in a way that we not only grow our role as a brand ambassador, but that I can show our companies ROI for our positions. Because in the back of my head, I was always worried that the lack of systems built were gonna ruin this opportunity again, that we were gonna get canceled as a program again because we couldn't show the return of investment that we were bringing to the table. And I wanted to make sure that we didn't only show our passion on the streets, but we could also show our passion to our corporate boards and our executive boards, and kind of like make it all very seamless. So I think that's like how I ended up here now.
I love that in terms of the growth of a brand ambassador role and what anyone in a brand ambassador role is capable of doing. And when you have that objective that you want to work as a brand ambassador, and then you start as a brand ambassador, and when you just start to see the different pathways within the organization that you can grow into brand, you can grow into marketing, you can grow into commercial, you can continue to grow in education, and from a local role to a national role to a global role, and that you can continue to also create those pathways within the organization that may or may not exist, and that really need your structure and your expertise and your creativity and your education and all the experience that you bring to the table through that role. So I think that's phenomenal, and how you've continued to grow through that. It's wonderful.
Awesome. I think we've had so many different avenues identified, and I don't even know if avenues is the right word. We all kind of dug it ourselves. But speaking of doing something yourself, I'm interested. We have a couple of founders with us today, and I'm interested in knowing, what was that moment, that catalyst, perhaps, like that moment that you realized that you were going to do this and you were going to start something, and how did that feel then? What does it feel like now? Allison, maybe I'll throw it over to you.
Yeah, I love listening to these stories, and I think so many people who are listening are probably like, oh yeah. Like there's so many points to relate, right? Like, oh my God, when I started working at 9 years old, and I could work because it was the arts. I was a professional ballerina. And I've never stopped. I've done everything from cleaning apartments to selling fine jewelry to the 1%er during the 08-09 recession, and like literally hauling millions of dollars worth of diamonds to Aspen just to do it. I've just done all these bonker things. And something that I knew about myself at a really early age is I needed to lead. I needed to do things my way. And if I could do things my way, I knew I would be successful. And that was just something that took me a minute to grasp, because I thought there was something wrong with me, that I didn't really fit into molds that were pre-established. I didn't work very well when I had to report to other people. And I really just thought, oh my God, I suck. People would tell me, you're terrible with time management, you're terrible at all these things. And then I realized, no, I just need to do it at my own speed, at my own pace, in my own way. And so I realized in my mid-20s, which was a long time, I'd been working since I was 9 years old. So I'd already had a pretty good career of a variety of things. But I realized that I needed to be my own boss, and I needed to have my own company. And so originally I thought, and this was the early 2000s in the US, I live in New York City, and I thought, oh, I'll import single malt whiskeys from non-traditional countries that are focused on terroir. Because no one in the US at that point was talking really about whiskey. It was still a vodka, Sex in the City, cosmopolitan era, or very big wine tasting world. But I was definitely a Francophile, even though I make my whiskey in France and I still don't speak French. Sorry, everyone. But I loved France, and I had done some dance, professional work, ballet work in France. And I was like, oh, this is kind of amazing. Everyone in Paris is drinking Japanese whiskey, and the rest of the world has yet to catch on. Like, this shit's coming, right? And so I started thinking, well, let me be the first to bring it into the US. And as I started to meet with these distillers, and I mean, basically, I just had a Twitter account and knew Nicola and Georgie, and we were just drinking whiskey in New York City. And I was like, this is going to be great. We're going to do all these things. And I literally just started spending my own money flying to these distilleries around the world. And they were like, hey, in a blind taste test, we bet you can't taste the difference between our whiskey from this one country and, you know, this product from Scotland. And I would just look at them and I'm like, you're right. And they were like, yeah, we're so proud. And by the way, these are the brands that still win all the awards. But to me, as this kind of rebel, like fearless fighter, I was like, you fucking missed the mark. Like, you just missed the mark. If you're going to take all this time and all this energy and all this knowledge to build a distillery outside of where this beautiful product has traditionally been made, why are you trying to copy it? Why aren't you going to create it? You know, create, not copy. So why don't you just use what's local and beautiful and indigenous to your area so that people, consumers, can start to take a sip and go, oh, this is so cool. I bet through the smell and the taste of this product, it might come from this particular region of the world, just like the world does with wine, right? And that this wasn't happening in single malts. Clearly, I'm still very passionate about it. 15 years later, still pisses me off, right? And I was like, oh my God, this has to be done. So I started to take my idea. There was only about 5 guys, all men, which was fine, in France making whiskey at the time. And I thought France should really be the leader of terroir-driven single malt whiskeys. So I gave my idea to all the men. And exactly what you think happened. Go back to New York, little girl. You don't know what you're talking about. It's a stupid idea. No one wants that. Everyone wants scotch. Well, no, people drink scotch because that's the only thing they've had access to, but this is a great idea. So I quickly had to realize that A, stop giving your great ideas away. B, thank you to all the men who said no to me. And C, I needed to find a distillation partner. So went to Cognac, found a man who was very excited. I was 24 at the time. I'm 38 now. I was 24, he was 28. He's the 3rd generation Cognac maker. And there's a lesson to be learned in here. And he had like already done an externship at a winery in Sonoma. So he was like very pro-American entrepreneurial spirit, very pro hard work. Like, he just got me. And I was sitting there like very excited. Hey, do you want to be partners? And he said no to me. And I thought, what is wrong with these men? And the historical Allison in that moment would have given him the litany of why he should be partners with me, right? I was going to try and prove my worth of being a partner. And it took me a second, but I didn't do that. I took an exhale and I thought, let me try and change my ask. Because every time I do that, I get a no, right? So instead of telling him why I was going to be such a great partner for him and how much money he was going to make, thinking that was his motivator, I said, cool, you don't want to be partners, great. What do you want to do? And it turned out all he wanted to do was be the farmer and the distiller, which meant I got to do everything from the barrel maturation to the development of the whiskey, owning the brand, developing like literally everything. And I own 100% of the trademarks and the brand and the whiskey and everything. And all it took was my very hard-earned life savings. But I literally wired it to him, and we got to start a business where he is literally our contract farmer and distiller for as long as he wants to do that. And I get to own everything else. And it was the point that changed the entire course of my life. And how did I feel then? Very excited. How do I feel now? Sometimes a little daunting, but still really excited.
I think you can see that. I think you can see that it emanates from you, and I think we all have a lot to learn. That when men say no, at least we can say yes to ourselves, right? And sometimes that's the best avenue. Effie, I'd like to hear a little bit about your story too. I know we were joking on social media yesterday. You were like, you don't have enough time for my story. But I'd love to hear a little bit about, how you brought Kleos into being and what you do today around that. You're on mute, by the way, Effie. Ooh.
All right, sorry about that. I was just saying, first of all, I'm a French major, or was a French major rather. So Allison, you need my help with translation services or dealing with the Frenchies. I'm happy to help. I actually studied foreign languages in college. Ended up I taught high school Spanish, ended up doing tastings and promotions. So I was like a promo model. I was the Midori girl in Boston. I did Chambord. I met Rob Cooper when I was 19 years old doing Chambord promos in Boston. And I actually have a pretty traditional career path in the spirits business because I went from doing that to being a market manager for Bacardi, to being national brand ambassador for Metaxa, which is the largest global Greek spirit brand. It's a Greek brandy. And it was when I was with that job that I got to go back to Greece as an adult. So I'm in Mykonos, 2008. I'm at a crazy beach bar called Namos, very kind of trendy spot. And everyone around me is doing shots of mastika. So when you think Greece, you pretty much, Americans will always think Retsina, which is this, crappy pine sol smelling table wine, and ouzo, which of course is like anisette. So Greece has never had like this great reputation for wine and spirits making. And I taste mastika for the first time, and it was all Americans around me. There were tourists that were drinking the stuff. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, this is fucking delicious. Why the hell is this not in the United States? And I'm going to be the one to make this happen. But on top of that, like, I had a very kind of Proustian rush because mastika is something that we grow up with as kids in Greece as a spoon dessert. Like, sadly, we take this precious ingredient, mash it up with glycerin and a bunch of sugar, and it looks like fluff, and you swirl it around in water and suck on it like a lollipop. So I knew the flavor profile, but was so amazed that this existed in an alcohol form. In 2007, Saint Germain had launched in New York and kind of, blew up like wildfire. And actually, I was on a podcast yesterday, and I said, like, I call it the Saint Germain effect. It was this totally unique flavor profile that opened up a whole new world of cocktail opportunities. And in my head, I'm like, mastika can be this. This can be the next Saint Germain. I'm going to be the one to make this happen. I ended up consulting for the largest brand out of Greece. Very long story short, I got screwed out of a $30,000 consulting fee, worked for free for this guy. He then presumed I would continue to work with him for a $3,000 a month retainer. And I basically told him, peace. And I had this very wealthy Greek friend who I'd also met in that Mykonos trip that had kind of seen the whole 8-month transgression of me, putting all my heart and soul into helping this guy get into the United States, get an importer, get a distributor. And he was like, look, if you can create a valid business plan, I'll invest in this. And so that's how that got started. It started by me just creating a budget, really. And then, kind of I actually did a pretty legit volumetrics exercise where I tracked out, because I was national for Metaxa, I was dealing with like 10 different markets. So I actually tracked out accounts, did sales projections, the whole thing. It was pretty rudimentary, but to be honest, my business plan now is still very much based on that initial volumetrics exercise that I did. This particular guy committed to 1.5 million, and I was skipping around New York City, at whatever it was, 30 years old. I can't even remember at this point. And he then, and that was for 35% of the company. Then when we were doing our operating agreement, he tried to jimmy in 65% of the company and a pregnancy clause stating if I got pregnant, I could be removed from the company as CEO. And so, a lot of times we bash the men, but I'll tell you, two of my big allies before I had an official board were Steve Lutman and Jerry Schweitzer from LeBlanc. And they were like, F, this deal sucks, get out, Meanwhile, I was kind of like, but it's a whale and it's one guy and it's 1.5. Like, I just did not want to get on the horse and try to raise money, but obviously pulled out of that deal. And living in New York, I was consulting for startup brands, making no money. and I didn't want to go back to working for the big guys, and I had to. And I ended up taking a brand manager role on with Di Serrano, and thought foolishly that I could continue to try to raise money and get Kleos off the ground. And Big Brother was always watching. I had a $7 million budget to manage with Di Serrano. And, you know, I was the first brand manager ever dedicated in the United States for that brand. So it was a lot of work. And by the time I got things smooth sailing and reached back out to the distillery in Greece, which was the Metaxa distillery, I was blocked from that distillery by the old guy that I consulted for, because he was also making his juice there. He made them sign an exclusivity agreement once he found out that I was trying to make juice at that distillery. And so I was forced to try to find someone else to work with in Greece. And it ended up being a blessing in disguise. I found Greece's first female distiller at the Best Craft Distillery. But really, it was like 3 moments, right? Where that Mykonos moment, that moment where this guy thought I'd work for him for $3,000 a month. And then working at Di Serrano, it was just and me slowly trying to get this thing off the ground. It came to the point where I was like, if I don't do this, it's going to be written on my tombstone. And like, if anyone here, I'm sure a lot of us here have had this feeling where it's like, I felt like this is my fate and my destiny, and I absolutely had to make it happen. And I would be ashamed of myself if I didn't. And that was kind of the place that I came to. And then the universe always helps along the way, right? I felt like if I had gotten that 1.5 million at 30 years old, I may have fucked shit up really badly. Actually working for Bacardi and working, you know, Di Serrano and being in that very structured corporate environment, which I did not like at all, actually taught me so much more and really helped kind of build up my street cred anyway when it came to really raising money for Kleos. So yeah, how do I feel now? Like a masochist. I say that all the time. Like I sometimes bang my head against the wall when I'm doing liquor store tastings, because I'm like, oh shit, I was doing liquor store tastings when I was 19. I'm still fucking doing liquor store tastings at 42. Where did I go wrong in life? But I'd have it no other way, you know? That's it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I've always enjoyed watching you and your journey, and just being a voyeur and watching you be so strong. So I'm color me inspired, because that's what I continue to be. So thank you.
Absolute persistence. It's amazing. I mean, it's really inspiring. So we've also talked a lot on this panel already about the importance of education. I want to ask you guys, what are some tools, be it classes or books, programs that have helped you change your career? What have been game changers for you with your career that have helped mold your job or your career and made you stronger, made you better? Lynn, I'm going to start with you on this one because you talk education a lot.
Excellent. Well, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. There's so many cross similarities. I was a theater girl too. One of the greatest lessons that I had was actually from an actress. Her name was Regina Taylor, and I was very fortunate to work alongside with her. And she, as a woman in the theater industry, has had a very long career, particularly as a woman of color, which is something that you just don't see. And I had asked her a couple of things. I asked her, you know, what was the key to your success? And the first thing that she said was, you've got to create your own work. Nobody's going to bring it to you. And then my second lesson was, I had the opportunity one time to actually wait on Anne Bancroft, who is just like, you know, goddess in the theater world. And I'm like, what has been the secret of your career? And she's like, never stop learning. And those two lessons from those women, even though that was in my acting days, has actually carried me through bartending, brand ambassador, to where I am now. So to always be in a mindset of creating your own path, setting your own goals. And if it's distillation, if it's education, if it's brand work, what is it that you have to do to get to those goals? Looking for those classes. You know, if you're in the bar, I'm like, don't just study spirits, study wine, study beer, study sake, study water, study terroir, study farming, study gardening, you know, learn about everything that's going into there, because that's just going to make you much more well-rounded, and it's going to enhance your talents. I myself had the great opportunity here in Illinois. Southern Wine and Spirits had the Academy of Spirits of Fine Service. So I attended that session, finished valedictorian because I'm a Virgo. So once we dig in, we dig in. Went on to study at the Academy of Spirits, the Advanced Academy of Culinary Mixology. Went on to study with bar. But in the meantime, every single opportunity, and this is when I was behind the bar, that I could learn from somebody, I took that opportunity to learn from somebody. So, I mean, there were so many times that like Tony Yabaganim or Gaz Regan or Dale DeGroff, they were coming into town and I was like, I'll be their bar back for this event, you know, just to listen to them, just to hear their stories, just to kind of watch out their philosophies. Anytime when I travel, if I can take a class, I take a class. My library of books, it's ridiculous. I think I just bought like 6 more this week on like race relations and stuff because I was so inspired by that, because I'm looking at that in this industry as to how, as a person who's very visible, to continue to promote equity and to showcase women, particularly women of color in this industry. And so, you know, leave no stone unturned is what I'm going to say for education. And go out of your comfort zone for education. I think that's really important. You know, take a class, take a science class, take a, you know, geology class, understand terroir, take an art class for visual if you're creating cocktails. I took a knife skills class, you know, just to be better at garnishing, you know, all those things. And so, you know, for me, education is once you stop learning, you've died. Essentially. So always have yourself in the mindset of continually learning. There's always something to learn from anybody else. I too am a grandmother and I learn from my grandchildren. You know, you're never too old to stop learning, and, you know, set your own goals and set your own path is what I want to say to all the women out there watching. Don't let somebody tell you what your career should be. You decide where you want to be in a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And then you figure out that path on how to get there. And it's going to be your own and your unique. And women are great at this because we are natural multitaskers. So.
Love that. Thank you, Lynn. Jenna, I'd like to bring the same question forward to you as well. How, as far as education goes, what classes, what books, what has inspired you?
So obviously other people have inspired massively. I still remember the moment in which I was like, oh gosh, this idea of whiskey, it's actually so interesting. And it was a colleague of mine now in Diageo, Colin Dunn, but at the time I was working for a bar and they just got it into Diageo and literally made us climb on chairs and tables and whatever to have a bit of a Kaolila and a bit of Port Ellen. And I remember how special that moment became, and like the few days after I was just talking about it and I was like, oh god, there's something really interesting in there. So they give me on a lot of a curiosity part. In a way, I almost feel like frustrations, and when somebody tries to close a door in front of my nose, I get more motivated to come back stronger, to go do a bit more research. So I'd say totally put yourself out there. For me, getting out to tastings, and I remember when Georgie was on Mortlack and she had a wonderful event in this in the design museum in London, and I was there, and I even remember the beautiful perfect dress that she had, red of color, and I was like, and she's a woman and she's nailing it, and so this is possible. And then it was a bit of a matter of like actually pushing for knowledge and meeting other people. And I still remember night after night after night trying to convince people I was working with, whether it was events or whether it was in a bar, like, hey, should we go to Kentucky? And, you know, bartenders at midnight, yeah, Jenna, the heck with it, it's happening, we're doing this. Then you go and like plan some of the things. So guys, this would be the plan. And everybody, yeah, I've got a wedding, I got to buy a new scooter because I was working with loads of Italians. There was always like something in the mind until one of them really got tired of me asking. And he said, do you know there's a thing called Camp Run Amok for like people like you who really want to go there and don't have friends to go with? And I was like, no, but tell me all about it. And a few months later down the line, that's where I met Robin. So a lot has been about be unapologetically asking for what you're curious in and what you want, because that's sometimes somebody's going to listen. It can happen easily and fast, or it can happen longer. But I think my learning and my continuous learning is just because you said it 100 times doesn't mean anybody else heard it enough times to do something for you. Other than that, on frustration, it was quite interesting how going to so many tastings was a lot of being in Britain and not having grown up with like the regular sweets and everything in here. A lot of the vocabulary was a lot concentrated into brands like that. I'm not having a really sweet tooth other than ice cream. I can tell you everything about ice cream, but I don't really know about Skittles and Maltesers, and like the diversity of corner shop sweets in the UK is just massive. And I was like, whilst I love this, there's two ways about it. I'm gonna go and like break a sweet tooth while tasting all these ones and take tasting notes of sweets. And I've tried part of that. It was quite hard because they all just taste really sweet to me. Or I could go and find a way in which I can create my vocabulary and bring my vocabulary into what I like. And that comes a lot from the world of spices and teas, because that's what I've been culturally used and fascinated by. And it's almost like in my family, you get a slap of paprika when you're about 5 years and they see how fast you can run. So it's a lot about like, well, I'm frustrated because I don't really understand what these sweets are, but maybe I can talk through spices and bring people those spices to like feel and interrogate with them. So I'd say find what is your own special, because there's not one way to talk about flavor, and bring it in with you. I know Nicola's been doing that with olive oil, and I just find that so inspiring that I'm just going to go further with like what I think that tea and whiskey have together in common and the territories they can expand. But I think for me, my biggest kind of learning, which I know it's not really fitted for this Zoom world, is go and visit and stop and connect, and everywhere you travel, find a way to visit a distillery or you visit something else related to taste and interact with those people and kind of really create your own stories. Because it's nice to read books and it's helpful and it gives you a backbone and a background. But actually my favorite times when I hear you ladies and other ladies and gents speaking is when they bring their own experiences, rather if it was the only sunny day in Scotland or if it was that bus that never got us all the way to make us mark, for example, in Kentucky, because it got broken. Yeah, that's me. A lot about visiting, living, and bring your own baggage.
I love that. I love that also both you and Lynn touched on with education that it's not just, again, one pathway, straight and narrow. You should be reading this book, you should be doing that, but exploring. I always say follow your nose, follow your heart, follow the things that you're passionate about, and somehow it always ends up influencing what you do in the spirits industry. It all comes back. So whether you're studying tea, whether you're studying coffee, whether you're studying olive oil or perfume or whatever it may be, it always comes back or wine, it always comes back and influences what you're doing in its own way that it's supposed to, which I think is incredible.
Nicola and I met at doing whiskey and cheese tasting classes together because I worked in cheese. You know, I was in the cheese biz. That's a real place. For a long time. So anyway, I think we've talked a lot about spirits and books and things. I'm also really interested in what inspires you that perhaps isn't in the industry. And Jackie, I'd love to hear a little bit from you. Just what gets you going that maybe isn't necessarily to do with tasting lots of Old Forester, which is also awesome. But.
Which is awesome, but and I will make this quick because I do have a hard stop because I have to get to the warehouse today. But it has been such an amazing joy to be able to share this with you ladies. And I have loved hearing all of your stories so much. And there are little fragments of all of our stories that are sort of this common denominator. And that's a fantastic thing, because you do face days in this industry where you're like, am I on a fucking island right now? Like, am I the only one going through this? But like, no, like there is a whole network here, and I'm loving it. But for Old Forester, yes, hi Lynn. I know it's been a while. I think it's been like 6 years or something like that. For Old Forester, it's kind of an interesting position to be in. I am not a Kentucky native, and I am not responsible for looking over one of the most legacy brands in the state of Kentucky, like the Louisville's hometown bourbon, if you will. So my background is coming from a place of biology and chemistry combined with a very long run in the bar industry. Heavy load on cocktails. And so I think about flavor and I think about balance a little bit differently than some of my counterparts with our company and from some of our competitors as well. It's just, you only bring your experience. And Jenna, I was so excited to hear you reach that moment of realization of really owning your unique perspective of, well, I don't know what all these damn weird candies are, but this is what I've got. Because we need that, and everybody has to bring exactly what they have, what they're passionate about. You can't just keep trying to recite and memorize these narratives that other people have put in place, and we all just end up doing the same thing. And that happens a lot with our innovation as well. So we think of innovation as sort of like, what new thing that no one has ever done can we do? But there's a whole other side of that coin. And so for Old Forester, it's more of a historic brand. Our goal isn't necessarily of how weird and novelty can we take it. Our goal is how can we innovate in some of our methodologies of ensuring consistency and quality, and how can we update those things? And so there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes of sort of, I mean, if that's your goal, if you want shock value, like, hey, go invest in said shock value accordingly. But for us, our main pillar is quality and consistency. So that's where we really funnel a lot of our energy. But travel opens up your eyes. Seeing what other people are doing, of course, is always inspiring, but I always lead with my own experience. So when I designed our cocktail provisions line for Old Forester, it's a line of bitters and syrups that we use for now our cocktail marketing strategies. Every single one of those bitters was a collaboration of family memories that I had that I put into a bottle of liquid. And it's very long-winded and weird, I realize that, but like smoked cedar, cinnamon, came from, I had this really great aunt who made really great sweet tea, and I can never figure out why it was so damn different. And like, they lived in Illinois and we lived in Missouri, and it was like bizarro land over there. She put baking soda in it, which I guess is like a thing now in your sweet tea, if anyone has ever heard of this. So anyways, Aunt Terry, I need black tea in that blend. They had this really weird old cedar closet in the basement. I remember that smell. I remember like it was yesterday. I remember the little air freshener, like wax pellets that were in this owl-shaped weird little air freshener thing. So the cinnamon pulls in from that. And so every time I smell those bitters, I'm immediately taken to this moment at my aunt's house for Christmas. And I was not allowed to drink soda growing up. The smoke comes in a really weird place here. But I wasn't allowed to drink soda. And there's this can of Diet Coke on the table, and no adults were in the room. And I was like, I'm totally gonna, I need to know what it tastes like. I must know. And I took a sip, and my uncle had been ashing his Marlboro Reds in it the entire time. And so that flavor, that immediate just like ashy nastiness, like just took over. And so I like, but it's like a moment. And I think the same thing happens with cocktails. You capture a moment of inspiration. I mean, I don't know how many of y'all like during normal tales, I guess we can call it normal tales, in-person tales, your first tales experience came back going, holy shit. Like just the sensory overload of just being in New Orleans and so inspired of different smells and sights and flavors and colors. And you wrap it all up into like this nice little glass for someone else to experience and it's kind of out of ego because they're never going to know because they weren't there, but at least you put your best foot forward, you know, like you painted a picture of a rocket. No one has to know it's a rocket. It's a rocket to you. That's totally fine. But I don't know, it comes from so many different places. But like I said, it really is, it's different for every brand. It just depends on what your goal is. If we were a brand that was, like I said, trying to do something very shocking and weird and trying to find what's the weirdest barrel we can finish things in, that's a totally different perspective. But from our end, it is a constant analysis of going internal and like, how can we do better? How can we make this more consistent? How can we guarantee the sustainability of this brand for generations to come?
Oh, I love that.
On that, also, I'd love to jump over from Jackie over to Anne to talk a little bit more about innovation with your background and everything. How do you what inspires you when it comes to innovation and when it comes to creating a new product and just riding along with all of those flavors and all of those layers of flavors and aromas?
I think, it's been awesome listening to Jackie just there talk about her process and talk about what inspires her, because I think there's so much that's so common to people when they're getting creative. And my background is pure science. I've got a PhD in organic chemistry. So I come from the lab. I was a lab rat for a number of years. And when you're in the lab, it's all about reproduction. It's all about doing something very precisely over and over again to get the result you need. And yes, there's some creative thinking around it that happens outside of the lab before you get in. And really, when I moved into distilling, I was working for a small craft brand, but I was taking over production of gins that had been being made by a contract distiller. So again, it was more about reproducing what had already been done and trying to get the flavors that were already there. So it's about consistency. And then I joined Bombay Sapphire, and Bombay Sapphire, one of its mantras is about creativity. It's got this real drive to be different, real drive to try and push the boundaries and see what we can do, but within that sphere of Bombay Sapphire. And so kind of, I sort of had to split my brain up a bit. So I've got this one side that is just making Bombay Sapphire as Bombay Sapphire is meant to be made. Don't change anything, don't mess it up. That's like one side of my brain. The other side of my brain is like, yeah, but what can we do different? And it's managing those two different halves. So one of the things I find is, like Becky was saying, I go through life, I go traveling, I go sit in bars, I go and visit other distillers, and I think my brain's constantly downloading information and just filing it away. And then what I really need to do is make time for myself to be creative. And I don't mean, right, let's block off 2 till 4 on a Wednesday afternoon and then I'm going to be creative, because that just isn't going to happen. So what I do, and what I don't know whether it works for anyone else, but it's almost like my brain's done all the downloading, and then every morning I get about half an hour earlier than I should do. I'm a morning person, I'm quite happy getting up early, which as a distiller you have to be. And I go out for a walk, and I don't put music in, I don't take anything with me, I just throw on a hoodie, I don't put my makeup on. Most of the time I don't even put a bra on, just hoodie on, joggers on, trainers on, out for this walk. And I don't really go anywhere interesting, I don't see anybody, and some days after the half-hour walk I've come back and I've barely woken up and I just go to work and that's it. But some days, for some reason, just having that space in the morning and having that time to think, my brain goes mad, and all that information that it's been slowly storing from that bar I went to, from that country I visited, from that food I had in that restaurant, suddenly sort of collides and comes in, and my brain starts shouting at me. And that for me is a really powerful moment. I think that's really important because we get so busy. Everybody's busy. I think that's all anyone says at the moment is, I'm so busy. And particularly for women, I mean, I'm lucky I'm not married and I don't have children, but if you do have a family, you've got your to-do list is never ending, and making that time for you, A, for yourself, but also B, for your brain, is really important in the creative process, for me, certainly.
I love that. I'm also a big hiker and being out in nature and everything, and I find that taking that time whatever it means to you, wherever that peaceful time is, that time to refresh, that time to check in, that time to absorb all of those details, and when you have those moments, it's just essential, I think for anyone in this business, right? I'm going to move the next question over to Robin. I want to ask you, well, I'm always seeking career advice from those whom I admire. So I'd like to ask you, what advice would you have as a woman looking for any woman who wants to pursue a role like yours in this industry? What's your advice?
I will tell you that my life's motto is, the answer is always no if you don't ask. So ask the questions. The role that I am currently in did not exist within our company. And actually, this is the second role that I'm in within our company that didn't exist. I just keep going, I want to do that. Can we just make that a title? So yeah, I mean, like, there are no rules throughout the rule book. There are no rules. You can always ask for what you want. I mean, I have to say I'm incredibly lucky that I work for a company that listens to my crazy ideas and goes, okay, fine, great. If it's gonna make you happy, do it. But yeah, I mean, I also, I mean, same, Nicola, always going to people that I love and respect for that advice. And also reaching out to a diverse group of people for advice. It's very easy to fall into that, I'm, obviously like Lynn and I are neighbors, so I often connect with Lynn and Natasha, the Chicago syndicate here, represent Chicago. But also going outside of that, I have a really dear friend, talking about inspirations. In the past few years, I've really looked outside of our industry. And I started attending TED Women and have found so much inspiration through going to conferences that have nothing to do with our industry at all, and became really great friends with a woman who works for Microsoft. And she's become someone that I consistently bounce ideas off of. And I have another friend who worked in the industry and now runs an entrepreneurial, it's like a startup incubator company. So she's someone that I oftentimes go to. So having a diverse group of people that you can interact with and get advice from, I think is incredibly important. But ultimately for me, it's so, I think for women especially, it's that old adage of, we won't apply for jobs that we don't have 100% of the skills that are listed. Forget that. I will tell you right now, I did not go to college, not a single day of college in my life. And I think I've done okay. I feel like I've done okay without a college degree. So there is not a specific linear path for everyone. And I really ultimately thought that I would end up more in that, distilling. I would go down that whiskey path, and it turns out that my passions took a veer, and I ended up in a very different place. So yeah, hopefully that's advice that everyone can connect with, but that's what I do.
I think that is amazing advice. And when I've seen you attending the TED conferences and everything, which I think is just a phenomenal way to continue to expand the way that we approach things, the way that we think, the way that we work, the way that we live our lives. And even earlier today, we were just talking about how we just discovered that we both are taking classes with Simon Sinek and his team. And so again, those different pathways of growth mindset and continuing to think outside of the box within what we do at work and beyond that as well. So I just think that's great advice. I don't want this to end. I know, unfortunately, I want to keep going, but I know that we do have to wrap this up. So I want to say quickly, Jordan, any final thoughts, anything that you want to jump in and say?
My journey to this, to where the privilege, that I have to work with Brown-Forman now has only been because other women in my life have lifted me up. This conversation has lifted me up. Thank you so much. You are all inspirations. Nicola, thank you for pushing me into this industry and therefore giving me access to folks like this. I always like to say, Robin, building on what you said, people want to help people. I truly, deeply believe that. Like, despite all of the BS that's happening in the world right now, I truly believe that the most people are good at heart, and that people want to help people. If any of you watching right now are looking at any of us and wondering how we got where we are, or want to bounce ideas off of, or ask us for that book that we read, please do. I would love to offer any experience that could be useful to anyone out there. And I'm pretty sure how easy it was, surprisingly easy it was, to recruit such an incredible group to this talk today, that we're all pretty open if we see an eager woman wanting to break into this business, and that we'd offer support. So I was a little bit rambling, but really here to say this has been an inspiration. If this has inspired you, please ask, because people want to help people, and I'm trusting you, women want to help women in this industry. So
I am right there with you, Jordan. This panel shows everything from drive, determination, creativity, heart, the importance of continuous learning, the value of supporting one another, mentoring, being a mentee, helping each other out and lifting each other up, and how that creating pathways is, it's about opening new doors. And when those doors aren't open, then you find a window, you find a way, because it's about creating your own pathway at the end of the day. And there's no direct path. And here today, it's just been so inspiring. I see everyone chatting also, and I can't wait for the reunion. That's all I have to say, because having everyone here today and hearing your stories, I have so much to learn from all of you, and so much to, I cannot thank you enough. I'm really honored to have you all here today. I also want to say huge thank you to Jordan for being the best co-moderator I could ever ask for, and you are a constant inspiration to me. I hope that everyone that is watching this roundtable as well has enjoyed everything. Reach out. With that, I just want to close by saying, be bold, be brave, create your own pathway. Thank you so much, everyone. This was awesome. Thank you.